is up, everybody? Welcome to Comic Book Club. I'm Alex.
I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
And we're coming to you live from a couple of places on the internet. We're live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Twitch.tv. We're live on Facebook.x. We're live a couple of places, or maybe you're listening later at Spotify, Apple, Google. Definitely not on Stitcher, because we've been saying this on all of our podcasts, but Stitcher is going away at the end of August. Yeah. If you were subscribed there, please subscribe on any other major platform where we're available. But right here at the top of the show, frequent listeners of the show know this, we always start off the show with a really great opening bit. This is something that's really well-planned.
And we started finding, because we obviously have a comedic background, that just Alex saying where you can listen to the podcast is actually really good, really fun. It's really
we don't need a second opening bit, because that's already the funniest thing we've heard. No, we were just talking about this seriously before we went live. When we were live in person, we would always be like, okay, 2 seconds before the show started, when the music started playing, we were like, oh my God, we need to have an opening bit. What is our opening bit for the show? And we'd panic, and then we'd absolutely crush it every time out of the gate.
Because the real heads will know that we used to come out, walk out to the front of the crowd, and the three of us would just stand there and sort of riff for a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's fun.
Yeah.
Doing some crowd work.
Right. And you were wondering before we came on, Justin, where that came from. I think that came from we were trying to structure it like a talk show. So in the original lineup, it was opening bit. And
but did we ever have something written down that we were like, all right, hot off the presses, here's the
every once in a while somebody would come in with something and be like, I have an opening bit planned. I have an opening bit. I'm ready to go.
Yep.
But that was, when I say every once in a while, I mean like twice a year, maybe.
Well, let me say, we don't remember it ever happening, so I think it was pretty loose and coming from once in a while.
Yeah, versus this, which is tightly scripted. So listen, why don't we go to our guests, because we have two great guests for you today. Later on in the show, Jon Klassen is going to come on. But first, why don't we bring in our first guest here? He is the creator of A Never-Ending Adventure, which is currently crowdfunding on Zoop. Ladies and gentlemen, Oscar Osorio.
Hey,
Oscar, hello.
Oscar.
Hi,
welcome,
guys. How's it going?
Very well. Very excited to have you here. This is, as I mentioned, a crowdfunding project that is currently successful. You did it. You crowdfunded.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, we got funded.
Yeah. Before we get into that, though, I do want to kick it over to Pete, because I'm sure at some point he's going to ask you about your Beatles background. So, Pete, take it away.
Let's do it.
Yeah, did you do that art behind you? It was really very cool.
Yeah, no, this is like those stickers you put into the wall. So it was my father's choice. He's the big fan in the family. So
nice.
He passed it on to me. But yeah, he loves the Beatles. I love them too. But he learned English with the Beatles. So
that's awesome. Yeah. So does that mean like he was like, this is my favorite song, and so that's now sort of your favorite song when it comes to the
I
Beatles?
think that. Yeah, because he listened to the music when I was little, so I grew up listening to it, and it was like the soundtrack of all my childhood. So
that's nice.
I love the band too. I love their story. When they did the documentary, the one that just came out, it was like 4 hours of stuff. It was great. It's full of great history. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, the book you're here to talk about has nothing to do with the Beatles. We just love the background. So why don't you tell us about A Never-Ending Adventure? What is the idea of the book? What's the pitch?
Yeah, so A Never-Ending Adventure is a really personal book. It's about this person, Mark Bear. He's on a quest to become a full-time comic book creator. And he will have to overcome his demons. He's going to fight monsters. He's going to travel to different lands, and it's very personal because it's a journey that I lived through. I'm a former economist. I decided to become a full-time comic book writer at the start of this year. And
congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that there's like you think that when you are going to work on your passion, you're going to write comics and it's going to be wonderful and you're going to live the dream. But there's also a lot of stuff that comes out, like anxiety about thinking, am I enough? What happens if I can make it? Because I've been loving comic books all my life, and if I'm not good at that, then what am I good at? So there's a lot of stuff there that you
What
need
do
to
I need all
unpack.
this money for from my financial job? Money, yuck. Get rid of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. It's that because you had like the income and the security, all of that, and then you go into the artistic, the creative stuff. There's a lot of uncertainty, so I wanted to put all of those feelings into a book about someone that's going through this journey, and but make it comic books because he's going to fight monsters, he's going to go to travel, and he's going to experience this different stuff. He's going to talk to his dog, so and the dog's going to talk back. So there's a lot of comic book stuff in there that I wanted to put, but at its core, this is a story of someone that made a life-changing decision and now has to deal with the consequences and try to come out on top.
You
Yeah.
must have listened to that famous Beatles song "Comic Book Writer" over and over again
Oh
until you
boy,
finally.
come on, man.
More seriously, it must be extremely validating to do a book where you really are taking this chance to put together a comic book about what a big leap it is to put together a comic book, and then you are crowdfunded. Like you did get the money
Yeah, you
for
met
it,
your
and
goal.
you're able to make it. What was that feeling like when you saw the number tick over the amount you were looking for?
Yeah, I think that it was great. I think that it was a challenge because this is the type of book that I wanted to put out there because it's something that it's all me. It's like my debut as a comic book writer, and I wanted to show people what I was aiming for, what I was hoping to bring into the industry. But it's a really personal book, and sometimes it's even called biographical. And this is something that not so many people want to read, especially from a newcomer. So it was hard to sell it. I think that it was. It's a lot of fun. I think that the book has it is going to surprise the readers and it's going to be fun. But I had to tell this story about who I am and try to sell myself as a creator and sell my book as like a new book. And it was challenging. It was hard, but I think that it's part of the of what I wanted to put in the book. Like you're going to come as someone new and people are not going to know who you are. And there's a lot of books out there. So you need to stand out, you need to write, and you need to be on social media all day spamming everyone about your book so they finally pledge something. But I think I had the right artist. I think I had the right idea, and seeing it all come together, it was great. It was great to see the support, especially from people that like just show up, like people that I have never heard before that saying that they have seen my book. I was at San Diego last July talking to people, talking to other creators, and some people told me that they had seen my book on social media and stuff. And yeah, that felt good to like feel people like being aware of what I'm doing and being excited for the book.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
cool.
in terms of the biography or autobiographical, excuse me, nature of this, how did you moderate it? I mean, I'm sure it was different in every single case, but where did you find that line between, okay, I'm literally putting myself into this book versus I got to pull back and just tell the story that I'm telling?
Yeah, I think that this there's a balance in like making it kind of like more dramatic. I think that the real life, as fun as it gets, it's not as fun as a comic book. So there's a stuff that you need to put in there, especially like this type of fight sequences and the monsters and the protagonist's identity. Try to separate your own stuff from him and try to give his own voice. But this is something that I wanted to be this way because this is like it's basically my story. It's basically how I came to be as a creator, and this book needed to be really personal, just
Yeah.
to work as sort of my like my presentation letter to the comic book industry and saying this is who I am. This is the type of books that I want to create. And there's a lot of stuff in there besides like the protagonist's journey. There's also some commentary, there's also some comedy, and I try to mix like everything into the story and just create a fine equilibrium between all of that stuff that I wanted to put. It's like I've always heard like you don't have to save your ideas, you don't have to save anything for issue 2 or issue 3 because you don't know if you're going to get that.
Yeah.
So as excited as I was to create this book, I wanted to put everything in there, and yeah, it's a mix of lots of stuff, but at its core, it's who I am. It's my identity into a book, and I wanted that to be 100% clear because um, it's the passion that I think that everyone has. Like everyone has a story to tell. So if you tell it like with your passion, with your voice, people are going to show up.
And I want to
That's
ask you
great.
actually the idea that you transitioned out of like a probably pretty time and mentally consuming day job into doing this. I feel like a lot of people want to do that. Like you say, everyone has a story, everyone has a passion. What was it like, and how did you sort of move from the dream of like of getting your story out there in comic book form to actually accomplishing it?
Yeah, as I said, I think that it's been like 10 plus years that I started reading comic books and starting learning about it. So I've heard this comment because I made this like drastic decision of one day I was like economist, I was working with a consulting firm and doing all that stuff like finance. And the next day I was a comic book writer, and people tend to think that it was like an impulsive decision that I woke up and said I don't want to do this anymore. But being a comic book writer is something that I wanted to do. I think that at least for the last 5 years I known that I wanted to create comic books at some point, and it's something that was meant to happen at some point. So I've also learned a lot from other creators. I've seen there's a lot of stuff online to learn how to write a book, to work with people. Social media, it's great to find other collaborators. So it was just like the combination of years of becoming a fan, but to the extent that I wanted to create stuff because I've seen that there's a lot of people, a lot of collectors that they read a lot of comics, but they don't want to create comics, and that's okay. But for me, it was I had it was clear for me that I wanted to create my own stuff. So
You're
I
in too
was
deep. I have to
yeah.
make this now.
Yeah, yes, I was listening to like panels, listening to other creators during the pandemic. I was consuming a lot of their own content. They went into teaching, they went into sharing their own experiences, and I saw all of this and wanted to do my own. So it's a journey that started like 5 years ago, and I knew that at some point I was going to create a comic book. And this is just like the culmination of all those years of studying and learning and reading and also writing. I wrote articles, I wrote reviews, I was working with people. I'm from Peru, and I started writing in English. I started connecting with the American audience, with the American public. So it's something that has been like years in the making, and it helped me a lot because if it was like a rush decision, it would be impossible because making a comic is hard, and it's something that you need to be prepared. You need to have like this community. You need to meet people. You need to be engaged, talking to people, learning from them, and yeah, reaching out, building a fan base. I talk about that a lot of just getting people to know you before so you don't come like a complete stranger. And yeah, it's like years of connecting with the community, but it's
Yeah.
something that I love because I love comic books. So it's great that it didn't feel like a job. It was my hobby until I decided to turn it into my profession. But for me it was awesome. It was like meeting new friends, talking to people, and then oh, I can do something, I can create something. And when the opportunity came, I took it, and now we're here.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of now we're here, even though we said it's successfully crowdfunded, it is still running on Zoop, right? People can still support it, get copies of the book, get assorted swag, things like that.
No, right now the campaign
Nope.
is closed. We're working
Oops.
on we're working
Zoops.
on
Zoops.
yeah. No, we're working on completing the book. We got the funds, so we are going to complete the book. But as soon as the book is ready and we deliver on the orders and we have everyone happy that supported the campaign, I'm planning on making this book available to the people because I want to share it. I want more people to see it. I was like also trying to get a publisher or someone to just publish it and make it like more accessible. I think that with the book being funded on Soup, it's a big like something that publishers consider. But now I'm waiting on the book to be done. I'm talking with the artist. We are going to fulfill the orders, and once the book is completed, I think we are going to go on another round of going to publishers and trying to get this book out there, and
Awesome.
also just finding a way of getting it accessible to people, because I think I created this book as a book that people can relate to, and for me as someone that wanted to create comic books, I think this was the book that I would have loved to read like 1 year
Oh,
ago
nice.
or six
Yeah.
months ago.
Yeah.
So I want people to read this book and say, oh, maybe I take this decision, maybe I don't, and I don't want to write comic books, but they just see the book and get inspired or get discouraged by what's happening in the book. But because I try to make like make this book real. It's not like completely dark. It's not, oh, don't do this because you are not going to have a good time. But it's not also it's not like instant happiness. So I try to balance it, and I think that this book is it will be better when more people come and read it and get inspired by it.
Nice.
Awesome.
Oscar, I love that. I love your attitude. I love all of
Thank
this.
you.
I wish you nothing but luck with this book, and I can't
Yeah,
wait to see
congrats.
what
Thank
happens
you.
with the rest of the span of your career at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
All
you so
right.
much.
Thanks for coming on, Oscar. Have a great night. Good luck with
Yeah,
everything.
I
Oh.
just wanted to mention. Yeah, well, I'm doing this book. I'm also working on
Oh,
right
please.
now, and my next project is an anthology that has open submissions until Sunday. So if any creator out there wants to send a pitch and work together,
Oh,
you
nice.
can. Yeah, you can send it. Here you have my
Yeah, actually, can you
my.
describe the pitch? Because it's actually really exciting. I love this idea.
Oh yeah,
That
yeah,
anthology.
sure. Yeah. No, so the anthology is based on the moral dilemma of if you had the opportunity to push a button and you get a lot of money, but someone dies at random, would you do it?
Sorry, Pete's
And
already pressed the button like 9 times before you even
yeah,
finished.
yeah. No, and I wanted to. This is what I meant with like the social commentary stuff. Is this is like a dilemma of the value of people and money and how you compare both of them. And as I mentioned, I come from a background of corporate jobs, so I know that there's a problem right now with the value of people and the value of money and how people see it. So I created this anthology with each story is going to have someone that gets the button and needs to make this decision and what happens next, where is the story, when the other characters are up to the creators, and it's got a great success. The submissions, we have a lot of submissions. It was kind of unexpected, but it's good, and I'm really excited for this project. And as I said, the submissions are open until Sunday, so if any creator out there still wants to pitch something, we are completely open to that. And you can do it here at Oscar OM 29, which is at you can find me at the socials with that handle. And yeah,
Nice.
and I also have a Substack page, so it's oscarwins.substack.com,
Oscar wins.
and in there I'm going to publish some short stories. I started with my book crowdfunding on Soup, and right now I'm doing the anthology, and I'm also working on building a portfolio of short stories so people can get to know my work better. Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for the this second half of the year to for people to start seeing my work. I've been like trying to promote myself, my story, what I hoping to do in the industry and to contribute, but I have yet to show my pages, my finished story. So I've doing these short stories like for the end of August, the end of September, I think is going to be out there, and I'm excited for people to see more of what I'm wanted to share.
Great.
That's
Absolutely
awesome.
awesome, Oscar. Thank you for plugging all that stuff. It is all so cool. And
Yeah.
once
Thank
again,
you.
have a great night. It was good chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you so
Take
much
care.
for the opportunity. Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye,
All
Oscar.
right. There we go. Once again, the main project he was talking about was A Never-Ending Adventure, which you can check out soon in the future. And that was Oscar Osorio. Let's bring in our next guest. He is a multi-award-winning author and the creator of his most recent book, The Skull, a Tyrolean Folktale. Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Klassen. Jon, welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh my gosh, thank you for coming on. So as mentioned, you've been creating award-winning books for years. They're children's books. This one also ostensibly for children, but much longer. I just kind of wanted to start off this just in terms of terminology. Do you view this as a graphic novel? Is it still a children's book? Is it something else? What do you call it?
I did think of it as kind of a graphic novel. I even tried to do it as like a comic, but it didn't work. I got like 2 pages in and realized I was way out of my depth. Comics are a whole different thing, and it turns out that unlike usually my thing, at least for the younger books, but just generally, I like to skip information and not show certain changes or whatever it is. And comics, at least as far as I would do them when I tried, were like I couldn't stop showing every emotion change or every beat in a line or something. That's what it's good for, I thought. And I was just like, I'm never going to finish this if I do it this way. I can't do it. And so it doesn't have speech bubbles or that same format, but I would love it if they did shelve it with the graphic novels, because I think it has that feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, because I think you use the text into images as a great way of sort of setting up and punching different emotions, whether it's like sort of horror is a little too extreme, but sort of the like extremity that happens to our main character and the punchlines or the comedy side of it. I really love the way you sort of combine them in a comic book way.
Thanks. Yeah, there is some. I was a storyboard artist when I first started working at animation studios, and so like a setup in a beat or a cut or something is still a big part of the language. But for this one, it felt like it was sort of a mix between all that stuff, between like picture book language and then storyboarding and then whatever comics can kind of give you without actually dedicating yourself to that way of delivering information. It felt like it's in there somewhere, though. That's really great. Thanks.
Before we get too much further, though, can you tell us about the story? And I love in the back matter you sort of talk about how you developed this story, and I think it's super interesting. So tell us about it.
Yeah. I do book touring a lot because I do kids' books mostly, and I was in a library in Alaska waiting to do like a talk, and I just sort of wandered into the folk section and found this book with this story in it called The Skull, and it's like 4 pages or something. And I read it really fast before my talk and then put it back on the shelf and picked it up on my way out, but I forgot the name of the title and everything. And then on the plane on home, I just kept thinking about this one little 4-page story. And then like a year later, because I don't adapt stories, it's not usually how I work, so I wasn't really thinking about doing that, but I just couldn't stop thinking about how I would. I asked the library, I wrote the library in Alaska saying, I read this one tiny story in your library somewhere. I don't know the book or anything. And the librarian, sure enough, like in 2 hours, she found it and scanned it. I don't know how apparently librarians, this is like their favorite things when they get someone who emails them like that. And it's like, I don't know anything. Find me a book.
How busy do you think the Alaskan librarians are on the daily? Are you just
How dare you, Justin? They're crazy busy.
Well, I'm just saying there's not a lot of people up there. There are fewer people there.
But you'd think that they wouldn't have much to do, and so like they would be at the library a lot. But either way, the Juneau Alaska Library, giant props to the Juneau Alaska Library. And so I got this story back, but I read it again and I had changed it. I don't know if you've had experiences like this. I have it a lot because I'm in kids' books, and so when you go back to books that you remember when you were a kid, you have these memories of them, and then you've changed them a lot. You read them again, you're like, I don't remember any of this, and I remember it being much bigger or much smaller or much the colors or whatever. Your head has changed it, and it happens to me with kids' books. But this is the first time that it happened to me like this, where I had changed like the back half of the story at least. I'd forgotten how the original story ended, but I still remembered, what I thought the story was. And this was an obscure one enough. I hadn't heard it in any other place before that I thought maybe I could just take it and do my old version. Whatever my head had done to it, I liked it. I thought it had good reasons dramatically and structurally for doing it that way. And so I wrote that, and this is the book that we have, is the whole back half of the story has changed, but I still like it.
Well, but that's kind of the point of a folktale, right? Is it's not supposed to be literally written down on paper. It's supposed to be passed along and changed as it goes from person to person.
That is what I'm leaning on. Yeah, I'm telling myself that. I think sometimes when you see folktales, they're like, oh, it's not a fairy godmother. It's a wicked witch or whatever it is, and like sometimes they change minor things, but I changed the whole back end. But I was like, yeah, folk tales, right? We're supposed to change them. But I do think that, yeah, it's mostly the ending, and I think the whole beginning part is certainly in keeping with the spirit of the original story. But I always like folk tales for that. They always do feel kind of organic and weird, and you can tell there's weird like vestiges that people kept but forgot why they kept them, and so you walk down this one dead end street for a while with them, and then they have to come back to the main. It's such a weird form, but they're my favorite because they do feel always so organic.
What was it? I mean, you touched on this a little bit already, but what was it about this one story that really hooked in with you? Was there something thematic, something emotional about it in particular?
The emotional part actually was the thing I ended up doing to it. I think the story starts as a little girl who runs away from home and into the woods. It's like back in sort of village castle times, and she's out in the woods in the winter and running, and she comes across this house, this old house, and there's no one in it but an animate skull who she meets, and the skull says, I will let you in here, but you have to carry me around. It's getting to be a real pain to be a skull. I only really roll around, so I would love the help, and then you can come in. And so she says, yeah, no, it's no problem. I remember even just that part of the story, which is in the original part, being like, who is this girl who is totally nonplussed by this whole arrangement? It's like, that's better than what I was dealing with back home. And in the original story, there's a couple different versions, but there's like, again, it's just like a wicked stepmother that she's running from, or like a bad, family generally. It's just not a thing. But in my version, I cut it out. I don't say what she's running from. We meet when she's running, and the only thing we say is, Ottila, who is the girl's name, finally ran away. And that's all you get, the whole book. You don't know why she's run away. And I liked that much more. It seemed like a way in for the reader, for kids. I mean, kids know why they'd run away. They can usually slot in something there. But then also it became the interesting part of the book is that what she ends up doing, so the skull shows her around the house. They become pretty good friends in the day. He's a nice skull.
Yeah.
And there in the evening, he kind of tells her, look, you can stay here tonight if you want to, but I have to tell you, there's this headless skeleton that busts in here sometimes and chases me around, and I wouldn't mind help with that either. And she says, well, how often does this happen to you? And he goes, it happens every single night. He comes and chases me around. And so she gets really upset by this. She's upset both because, he's her friend now, they've had a day, but also you get the idea that she's run away from something, and she's like, God damn it! Like, I just left something.
This show's supposed to be better than my life.
Supposed to be better over here. And so, what I really liked about it, I think, partly is that there's this headless skeleton, right? He says, "All right, it's coming tonight." So she goes, "All right, I'll help you deal with that." And so they go to bed. They have a nice little going to bed. She gets pajamas, and it's a nice little bedroom, and they go to sleep. And sure enough, 2 a.m, a headless skeleton kicks open the door and chases them around the house. And at one point during sort of the tour of the house that the skull gave her, he shows her a tower and a bottomless pit, both those things. And so she leads the skeleton up to fools it into running up the balcony, pushes the skeleton off the balcony. It shatters into a million bones in the bottom. And she goes to the skull, okay, it's time for bed. And so she puts the skull to bed, but then she heads back out into the night. This was where I started to change it mostly, is I figured no one's going to believe that this animate skeletons put themselves back together. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, 100%.
He comes down there and takes every single bone, finds every single one, brings them to a rock with a rolling pin she finds in the kitchen, and beats them to dust.
Whoa.
Every single. And then she takes all that bone dust and puts it into a bonfire that she's made and burns the bone dust to ash. And then she takes the ash, puts it in a bucket, takes it back up to the dungeon that he showed her with the bottomless pit, and drops the whole bucket into the bottomless pit. And
she's the new Marvel Comics Punisher, essentially.
Yeah, she basically finds this in herself, or maybe she always had it. But that was the interesting part, is that as soon as we removed why she ran away from home, suddenly you have this great sort of device of a headless skeleton that only repeats one line the whole time. He screams, I want that skull, give me that skull, over and over again. So he's basically a robot. You've got the same device as like a zombie movie, right? Where you've got this villain that doesn't feel pain, or at least that has no pathos in it, that she can then sort of turn whatever she's working on, she can turn on this thing and she can take it out on this thing because you don't have any feelings for it. And I just love that as a story device, that you could do anything you want to this headless skeleton. You destroy it 4 or 5 times over. And that it makes whatever she's been through more interesting. It makes her more interesting. And it also just feels cathartic, I think, for the reader to just destroy something that's truly evil over and over again until it's gone. And that was what I changed, was that in the original story, like there was like a sunrise after the skeleton that chased them around for a while, and he goes poof and disappears. And then the skull changes into like a lady who's like, I was always a lady, and here's the castle for you. And then she disappears too. And I was just like, I don't get anything out of that. I want to beat the hell out of the skeleton. And,
well, it reminded me if like Beauty and the Beast like went sour. If they like didn't solve it, and someone showed up and was like, hey, look at all these skulls.
Right.
But it also reading it, like I have 2 kids. We do a lot of story time. And we've gotten into some stories that I used to read when I was a kid by William Steig.
Oh yeah, my favorite. Yeah.
I love William Steig stuff. These are stories like The Amazing Bone, which is
Amazing Bone is like one of the scariest children's stories.
It's so scary, terrifying.
Yeah.
And The Magic Pebble, or Sylvester and the Magic Pebble.
Yeah.
And they have like, and your story I feel like fits in there too, where like there's darkness at the edge, but it's about kids being sort of powerful and being able to be like sort of take control of their lives, and I just love that as a whole.
Well, I do a lot of thinking about his stories. That's so interesting you bring him up, because what he does so often in his books, especially for younger kids, the picture books, is that he sets up some impossible problem that almost is brought about by like weird magic he never explains, and it just feels like the most improbable thing goes wrong for someone. And then that whatever happens to them takes them down a truly emotionally relatable horror path, right? Like just a terrible situation. But then the solution is just as improbable. What ends up fixing the problem is just like magic also that he didn't even introduce. It just sort of comes across. And you're okay with all of that because you really want it to happen. He almost acts as if, what do you wish for when you're truly in a fix in your life? Like he puts you into a real position where like someone's kid has gone missing and the parents spend a year looking for him, and that's devastating. But then like a true miracle makes it okay. And you almost don't believe the miracle, but you're like, but that's what I wanted to have happen. It's almost like a wish fulfillment thing. And that was the same thing I used here, where it was like, I just really want to beat the hell out of the skeleton. Like it might not make sense, but like for the same reasons, like you find that being like your story compass is that like, what do I want to do? What do I want to feel like? And that's not, you don't even analyze it structurally. You're like, I really want to just kill him over and over again. Like I want him gone, like deeply gone. And so like his impulse, you can tell where he's like, I'm not even sure you're going to believe this, but I'm telling you, this is how the story goes. And don't you feel better? And like that impulse, just for kids, just be like, do we feel better? We feel better, right? We feel better. And that's kind of the only validity the story has to have. You don't have to learn anything. You don't have to see how she's nice or a better person or learn not to steal or something. You feel better. And that's enough to make a book, I think.
Oh,
Definitely.
Pete, did you have a question there? You were raising your hand.
yeah, I had a question, but I realized it was more for Justin and how he raises his kids. You know what I mean? So I thought maybe I'll save it. I'll save it.
We can talk about that in the when I eventually ask you to adopt my children.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you artistically how you tackled the skull, because obviously we're dealing with a still form here, right? Like it's on a page. You're not talking about animation or anything, but you've already got a skull that doesn't do much. He can't walk many places. Right. And then the way that you draw him, he doesn't even have the mouth part. It's just sort of this white wash at the bottom for the most part. Why that choice? And how you still got a lot of character out of him. So I'm curious about that as well.
I think that was what was interesting to me, is that how can we get character out of something that's like almost even has some of his devices removed, right? As you say, I don't draw teeth or a mouth on him. As soon as I did, he looked funnier than I wanted him to, or like with all the teeth, he looks like he's grinning or he's too menacing, and he's actually very nice and gentle. And even if when you put a line for a mouth, it just looks like he's about to say something, or he's got something like it gave you too much information. I often avoid mouths in my drawings for characters because it feels like, as you say, it's a still medium. As soon as you put a mouth on it, usually there's someone talking on the page, and if you were really illustrating that moment, they'd be talking, their mouth would be open. And so it's I've always had trouble with it. And so instead I just remove the mouth, and it's almost like they're thinking to each other then. I expect that's how she's receiving information from the skull, is that there's almost like a telepathic sound. And maybe she thinks back at him. I'm not really sure how that, because she doesn't really open her mouth very often either. But that was what was interesting to me about the story too, is that my characters in my other picture books, they don't emote very much. I try and find a way to do what you're talking about, where they can be still, but you still want to emotionally interest the audience. How do you do that? And with this story, it was like, well, here we have a skull who, as far as I'm concerned, shouldn't move at all. And then we have Ottila, the girl, who is pretty brave. You know, here we have this girl who's run away from home. She meets a skull. She's fine with that. All this stuff where she can actually play it pretty stoic too. And so the two of them going through deeply emotional stuff, right? Otilla's going run away. She's in this big, huge moment in her life. She's going through some stuff, but she's going to play it straight. And so is the skull. We have these two kind of statuesque drawings that I get to just place in different scenes, but not really have them do very much on their faces. And yet, hopefully, the audience is still emotionally connected. I like that contrast. I don't like to draw highly emotional characters. It just always felt like overkill to me. I'm just not. Also, I just don't think I'm suited to it. My style doesn't suit that kind of drawing. And so it's great if you can just put them standing there and be like, "Can I break your heart with them just standing there? Let's try." Then that's always.
You definitely got me, John. Like, I really enjoyed this top to bottom. There's something about the font you chose that had like sense memory to when I was a kid, and so like the whole book really, I just fell right into it and loved every
that font was really deliberate. It's called Century School Book, and I use it for most of my books because most of my books have to do with, someone murders somebody usually, or something happens that probably shouldn't, but we get away with it, I think, tonally a little bit, because Century School Book was what they used to use in like Dr. Seuss and P.D. Eastman and like Go Dog Go. That's the font, and it's a beautiful, warm. It's not, if you use like Futura or something sans serif, it feels very cold and austere, and it might suit the story stylistically, but I like it better when it looks friendly, and then you still say a headless skeleton kicked open the door.
Exactly. Yeah, it works.
Now you started in animation, as you said, or at least you did a bunch of animation, and then obviously have been ridiculously successful in children's books, which is great. Is that something you want to get back to at all? Could you see like trying to take, for example, this book and adapting it into a movie or a TV show or something like that?
I got into TV last year again. My friend Mac and I, who do books together, we have a series of books about shapes, the triangle, character, a circle, and square. And that got turned into a stop motion show on Apple. And it was I'd been in stop motion before. I was a set and prop guy on Coraline for that run of the movie. And then I'd been at DreamWorks at Story before that. And so I'd done like 8 or 9 years of animation work before I got into kids' books. And there was a lot I do miss about it. I miss the collaboration in the group, blame that can get spread around. And there's a lot to that. I miss
That's production right there.
It is
Group
production,
blame.
but I don't miss everything taking 4 years. And so I was like, the show was a nice sort of middle ground, because we got however many episodes out in the space of a year rather than 4 years. And that was really cool. But I did miss I think I've been spoiled a little bit by books, because you get all the control too. If that's what you want, that's what it gives you. And the stakes are a lot lower. These books aren't expensive to make. And so you don't have to convince a room full of Jeffrey Katzenbergs to back up your weird story. You just have to, the book editors are much more game, because they want to try at least a lot of them are. And so, I don't know, I go back and forth. I think this one probably showed that I miss film more than my other books, because I think it was written filmically, and I think I paced it like one. And I think I think you can tell I like movies, and I miss movies a little bit with this book, just because it feels like one to me. It'd be really fun. I think it would be really fun to adapt this one.
Well, on that note, you had mentioned Coraline, and I think semi-coincidentally, it's back in theaters right now. They did a remastered version. Have you been able to check it out as somebody?
No, I haven't been able to go. We have 2 little kids, and one is 6 and one is 4. And the 6-year-old likes scary movies. And so, I think a month ago, we were on a plane, and Coraline was on the thing. He was like, "I want to watch that one," and I was like, "Yeah, it's been a minute. I think you could probably watch that." And so he watched it, and it's the only movie he's ever turned off partway through. And he talks to me, he's like, "I should not have watched that."
Why did you do that to me, Dad?
He's game for everything. He loves everything, but that one, he was too scared of it. And so we have to take them if we go to the movies. I haven't been back to see it. I watched it on his seat with him, but that was the last time. And it's one of those weird things where, because it took so long, and I was so involved in it, I can't watch it without being like, "Oh, that wall is the wrong color," or something like that.
Too close.
I have no idea what the movie's like. It's so strange, because I think it has become something of a touchstone for, a younger set than me. We hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
And I give Henry Selick the credit for that all, because he was just such a magician. That production felt like such a crazy tornado. And then we watched it at the end, and we were like, "Holy cow, he did it. Like, this works." And I remember watching it then, but then as the years have gone by, I think you sort of lose perspective on your own stuff that you've worked on. It's weird.
Do you, when you were working on it, were you aware how traumatic the button eyes would be for viewers?
I think so. I mean, yeah, we would see the dailies and we'd see what we shot, and we're like, oh, all right. I mean, if you want to do this,
That's gonna haunt me.
He had a line though. Henry had a line because he was interviewed about it after it came out, and someone asked him, do you think this is maybe too scary for kids? And he said, well, who's your kid? Does your kid like scary movies? I loved that answer, and I lean back on that all the time because, like, we talk about stuff for younger kids, especially, and there is this weird, thinking that boardrooms can do where they're like, kids don't like that, do they? No, they don't. Or yes, kids love that. We'll do that. You can't do that. Kids are very, very, very different from one kid to another. And some kids, it'll be their favorite book, and other kids will just be bored and want something else or want trucks or, it's whatever they want. But I always love that answer from Henry on that movie. And it's true. I think that's exactly what lets you do the work you want to do. You can't be thinking about whether it's going to grab a whole age bracket. You can't do that.
Well, and I would argue, like, not to get too into like kids mentality, but like, when you're young, you have like more of a black and white, like, oh, that person died, or like, you can understand darkness for what it is. As you get older, we get into the mentality and it gets a little more complicated.
Kids are super interested in death, it turns out. Like, they talk about it a lot. You get a lot of questions about it. Even my books, which are before this one, they're kind of cagey and coy about murder and death, but even if someone does die in them, they're like, what, like death? Like, I want to talk about death, because no one talks to them about death, because all the adults take it personally and are scared of death. But kids aren't there yet. Their ego hasn't developed to the point where they are like, I could die. They just want to talk about things dying, and no one talks to them about it. And so
it's a mystery.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
When I was a kid, I loved The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that whole series. I'm reading that with my kids, and I'm simultaneously surprised by how flip it is at points, and very like, yeah, you'd be scared of this if I told you what really happened. It's like lines like that. All simultaneously is like, hey, guess who died? The guy we've been talking about the whole time. It's just like, whoa!
What? I love that first one. We talk about that one a lot, because that brother that sells them all out, I forget his name.
Edmund. Fuck Edmund.
He gets better in later books. He's a good character in later books.
I was always so fascinated by him, and I think about him a lot for my own books, because you're always like, that's our complicated relationship. Like, so often things for kids are like, you got to be a good friend, and here's how to be, or if there's a villain, he's a true villain. But Edmund wasn't either of those things. He was he didn't really even want to sell them out. You could tell he was kind of doing it for spite, and he probably felt bad the whole time. Like, that's such an interesting, when you're reading it when you're young, you're like, I know this guy. I am this guy sometimes.
Exactly.
And you don't see that very often. I love plot points like that and characters like that in kids' books, because they're complicated. They have complicated relationships with other kids and other people. It's neat to see it.
Now, obviously, this book has, relatively speaking, just been released. I think it came out on July 11th. But do you... well, first of all, what's the response been like now that it has been out for a while? Have you been able to tour around at all? Have you been able to get any direct feedback?
A little bit. I did some dates here in LA, just locally. I've never had a book come out in the summertime before. It's usually either spring or fall. And this one they put in the summertime with the idea of letting it sort of boil a little while and then ramp up around fall, when it looks like a fall book. It's called The Skull. And and so I've been reading it around a little bit, and it's always so interesting when I do read it. I think I've read it 4 or 5 times for kids, and you can read it straight through with them. They sit through it, which is really fun. But most kids want to know if the skull goes with the headless skeleton, if it belongs to, that's
what I've been struggling with this whole time. I'm like, don't kill the skeleton. You got to put the head on top of it so it can be a whole body again. Yeah.
I think you got to treat, like, when she asks him very carefully, like, you don't want this skeleton though, right? He goes, I absolutely do not. And so regardless of their relationship, in the old story, it was explained in a really long-winded way that the skull belonged to a lady who was beheaded by a duke, and the duke was beheaded for beheading the lady. And so the duke's body is chasing the lady's skull out of spite. He basically wants a skull, and he's like, well, I'll get the skull from that lady I chopped up. And so, like, it makes sense, you believe it, but so that's what explains that. That felt like I didn't want to add a chapter to do that, and I actually kind of like that it's a bit of a mystery.
I agree.
Powerful visual. A skull is a powerful visual. A headless skeleton is a powerful visual. The connection is a powerful idea, but you don't give it to them. Like, all of that is there's gasoline in that I liked when we left out who they are, and so people want to know that they all have their theories too, which is a nice place to leave it off. And for little kids, it's like, if you have a theory, that's run with that. It's okay. It doesn't break the story. It's fine.
Well, and it's very relatable, the idea that our skulls hate our bodies, which all of us agree.
I like that too. Like, yeah, the whole moral dilemma there of like, please get my body away from me. It's nothing but trouble. Like that. I mean, I can relate to that. Yeah.
But I love that she sort of intuits that this skeleton body is bad.
It's
not even like the connection, because I think reading it, I was like, oh, maybe it is a good thing, and I was like, oh, she knows it's bad, and she handles it.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen these books by John Bellairs? They're these old creepy chapter books for kids. They were done in like the 80s and early 90s. Edward Gorey did all the covers for them, and there's like a set of like 15 of them, but they're beautiful, and they're all about like little kids, like 10 or 11, who have like an old friend in the neighborhood who knows about talismans, and like there's a different kid each book most of the time, but that's the setup. And the way that he deals with magic in these books is really haphazard, and like, yeah, probably if you bring that necklace with you, it'll come in handy sometime, and it ends up scaring away like wraiths or something. Yes. But like, they don't get into that. But I've always loved that approach to magic for kids books, is like, you know, this is kind of going to make sense, but, you know, you don't get all the information. Just kind of trust that if you pick up a rock that you think looks magical, it's probably magical. Like that, like, just go with that. And
sorry, I had to look it up, but just for anybody listening, yes, I definitely have seen these. He did The House with the Clock in its Walls, the Mummy, the Will, and the Crypt, The Eyes of the Killer Robot. I remember
the titles are so good. The covers are they're hard to find. The old gory ones now, they've all been like republished 1,000 times. But if you can find the old hardcover gory things, they're beautiful. But yeah, they're just so badass. They just have these titles like The Eyes of the Killer. Like, he just knew what he was doing. They don't try to be allegories for anything. They're just like kick-ass little magic stories. They're great.
And I love what you're saying too, because I feel like now so many of our stories are like, well, here are the rules, and then we will then follow the characters, and it's like, it's so much more natural and exciting to follow the character who doesn't know the rules and maybe learns them near the end.
And I think that kids can relate to that too. Kids are game because that's their whole day anyway. You bring them to a basketball game and they're like, what was that? And you're like, right. He can't pass that line. I should have told you that before. Like, they're experiencing things backwards all the time, where they're like, what was that? That, I'm sure it made sense to everybody else, but I don't know this yet. And that approach to storytelling, I've always really liked it too.
Yeah. Before we let you go, again, obviously this is out now. People can pick this up now. Are you working on anything coming up? Anything else that you want to plug? Or are you just basking in the release of this one?
I have a book. I do books with my friend Mac Barnett a lot. And we have a book coming out in a couple weeks called How Does Santa Go Down the Chimney? And it's a real underhanded pitch to Christmas books. It's just like, let's make a Christmas book. But it's more of like a joke book. It's just Mac riffing on like kids' theories on how this might occur. How does a man get down your chimney? And
that's fun.
Happens that, like, all those kinds of things. It's not really, it's just sort of like a jokey, but we hadn't seen one like that. Often Christmas books get pretty sentimental and proud of themselves, and they're very handsome, and there's these, but we hadn't seen a joke book for Christmas very often. And so it was a really fun one to do. And especially on the back of something heavier like The Skull, it was just like, oh, no story, just a bunch of jokes for 30 pages. And so it's a good one. And that's out in like a month, I think.
Awesome. John, this is a great book. I wish you all the best with it as we head towards spooky season. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for chatting.
I was really excited to get the call. Thank you for having me, and for seeing the parallels between comics and this one. That means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really enjoyed it.
It is. I will call it a graphic novel at the very least.
I'll take it all day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. Have a good night.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, there we go. Once again, it is called The Skull, a Tyrolean Fairy Tale. It's on at bookstores everywhere, and it's awesome.
So
it's amazing.
It's just such a great read. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
The art alone is worth it. It's worth it for the art alone.
Weird way you just said
weird
that.
way to phrase your catchphrase.
It's the bananas. They are super tight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kaye, mother yippee fucker. What?
Whoa.
All right, we're going to move on with our next section, which is my favorite section because you all make it up. It is your audience question.
All right, I got a question.
I also have a question.
And all you got to do for audience questions is drop a question on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, not X/Twitter because they can't do that. But we got a bunch of questions from the...
I have an opening.
No. Me first. I've been waiting the whole time.
Here. Wait, but we talk about what we're drinking before we get into the questions. Can we do that first, or you got to do this?
No time.
Well, we had a cocktail that was curated by Stray Bullies, Brett Macris.
Our chef.
Brett
former
Mackery's, if you will.
CBC official.
No, don't you dare say that. He is
No, but
our
I'm taking
chef.
over.
Always will be our chef.
Yeah, but he curated something for the Gotham City cocktail book by Andre Darlington. Delicious sounding cocktail. A little bit of ginger beer, a little bit of rum, some lime, etc. Sounds good. But I don't think any of us made that. Or did you make that, Justin?
I didn't, out of a lack of the right rum to do it. I made a mezcal, grapefruit mezcal, and vermouth with lime juice. Just a real basic, sort of backwards
super
Manhattan.
basic.
Nice. Pete, what about you? What are you drinking tonight?
I'm drinking my new favorite beer, Daytime Lagunitas.
Excellent.
Pete loves daytime.
Drink in the daytime. That's the way to go.
And as for me, you know what it is, right? It's August 15th, which means it's time for pumpkin beer.
Boo.
The worst.
Boo.
Absolute worst. I don't even like to see that bottle go to your mouth.
I wasn't planning on it, but
but
my neighbors texted me. They were like, hey, do you want some pumpkin beer? And I was like, yeah, I want some pumpkin beer.
it.
You
you
truly
know
are the pump king of your local.
There you go. Well, it's, I will say, I say this yearly, but Southern Tier Pumpkin, if you're going to drink a pumpkin beer, it's actually a good pumpkin beer. They're releasing a caramel pumpkin beer this year. Very excited.
Yeah.
Now, before we get to your questions, the audience questions, my favorite questions, let's get to my least favorite questions, Pete and Justin's questions.
All right,
Pete,
great.
take it away.
Thank you, Justin. So let me just get this straight. You read a story that tortured you as a child. So then you had kids and were like, great, now I'm going to torture my children with this nightmare stories.
Naturally, it's sort of like now it's my turn.
Yeah, but why would you do that? You know what I mean?
Well,
like, why do you hate your children? Is that what's going
because
on?
I enjoy these stories, and the images in it are so memorable and evocative that, like, yeah, it's great. Like, it's scary,
I'm
but
the
there's nothing wrong with being scared. Like, it's good.
Well, but I also think, not to get too philosophical about it, but it's just like John was saying, right? The kids process this in a different way. I know I processed this stuff in a different way when I was reading it, and I loved
it. Just
dark
seems like
stories.
Like if something emotionally scarred you, you shouldn't be like, "Hey, kid, guess what?
Well,
it's
I don't
time
know.
for you to
it
get
didn't
fucked
emotionally scar you. I think. Well, I don't know. Maybe it did emotionally scar you, Justin. But things like Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That is a dark story. I was not sobbing and crying about, spoilers, Aslan dying or anything like that, but it's something that definitely affected me and stuck with me and got me excited about reading the rest of the books, not realizing that they were a very serious Christian allegory, like straight across the plate.
I also didn't realize that when I was a kid and reading, and now I'm like,
boy.
let's just keep to the
Yeah, it only gets worse
cool
as it
presence.
goes on, buddy. But all the other stuff you were mentioning, like you were talking about the William Steig thing, I don't think you brought up Mouse Shoes, which is the one where, like, he's walking and his shoes wear off and then his feet wear off. So he has no feet. So he has to buy new feet. And it's the sort of thing, like, as a kid, I was like, this is very funny. I am enjoying that this is happening. As an adult, sure, I guess you could think of like, oh my God, he has no feet. That's so terrible. But that's not necessarily where a kid's brain goes. Or
That's what getting old
frankly,
is.
I think if a kid's brain does go there, they don't like that stuff and they will veer away from that stuff. But there's some of us who do. I like horror movies. I like watching scary things. I enjoy dark stories.
Pete doesn't like that stuff, and I think he didn't read scary stories as a kid.
When you were a kid, what was that book they read to you? Ted Lasso?
That's right. That's a great idea. Somebody should be
children's
making
book,
a Ted Lasso children's book.
Yeah.
And Pete, gather around for this 3-minute commercial for NBC Sports called Ted Lasso.
Justin, did you actually have a question?
I do have a question. Pete, I have a bone to pick with you when it comes to garbage plates. I was in Cincinnati this past weekend. I went to Skyline Chili, which is a Cincy legend. Have you had?
I'm gonna write down in the chat here what I think Pete is about to say. And
Great,
then,
you should. You should definitely. So Skyline Chili, have you had this?
I have my garbage plate shirt on that says Rochester. So fucking bring that shit to me, man. What's up?
Have you had Skyline Chili?
Where is that? No, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Skyline Chili is a Cincinnati chain where they do pasta. This meat sauce they call chili, but it's sort of like a vaguely cinnamon-scented pasta sauce. A ton of cheese on top. I got a 4 ways with onions. Pete, Cincinnati's eating your lunch. They got garbage plates for days. I got a T-shirt that says what it is.
All right, yeah, it just says chili. It doesn't
It
say
says
anything
Skyline
for-
chili, my man. This is
All right.
Cincinnati legend.
Okay, great, man. I mean, I love meat sauce. I love pasta. Why not? That sounds great. That doesn't mean you're making a garbage plate, but it's still pretty cool.
Oh, interesting. Wait, so you're willing to embrace all of the garbage plates the world is conjuring for you?
Hey, man, bring it. If you're trying to do something creative and something fun, like why not? I think it's awesome, man. The more different kinds of flavor in the world, the better.
The more different kinds of meat pasta flavor in the world, the better.
I would love to try that, man. I'd love to get some.
Honestly, if you're ever in Cincinnati, it was I was out there for a shoot yesterday. We had ourselves some chili, and I didn't have diarrhea afterwards. So it was a real victory.
All right. Well, sorry to disappoint you, Zal, about what you thought I was going to say, but.
I was close. I mean, I'll put it in the chat here just for the record, but I thought you were going to say it wasn't Rochester, so it's not a real garbage plate, which you kind of did. You skirted
he
that
did
a little bit.
He got it. I would think he was happy he had his T-shirt on. He had the right garbage plate T-shirt on.
I had the right T-shirt. We had the right. We aligned our T-shirts aligned today, so that was great.
Yeah. Related to this, Kevin says, didn't we find out a while back that St. Louis had its own garbage plate? Yes, in every town there is a garbage plate.
There's trash. There's trash everywhere, and someday we have to clean up this great nation.
When I was in Detroit, they have these things called Coney Island dogs, where they really kind of like put meat sauce and stuff on their hot dogs. It's absolutely delicious.
Interesting.
The formula works.
That's right.
All right, another one, an actual question from Kevin. What are things you adored as a kid that really surprise you now?
Oh, great question.
I thought He-Man and Thundercats was the greatest cartoons of all time, and going back and watching them, yikes, does not make a lot of sense.
Simpler minds. We
Yeah.
had simpler minds.
Yeah.
Thing I adored as a kid that really surprised me now. I don't know if it surprised me, and this was more, my mom would always make this whenever we were feeling sick. She would make us noodles with cottage cheese and black pepper.
Wow.
And that was like the go-to sick thing. Thinking about it now, I'm
does
like,
your mom-
why
That's
did
like
I eat
eating
that?
puke. That's like eating
Right?
Seems
vomit
like your
in.
mom doesn't.
I don't know.
Like
it was
you
very
at all.
comforting at the time. I was like, oh, this is comfort food. But when I
Cottage
think back
cheese?
at it now, I'm like, what was she thinking? Where did that come from?
Oh my god.
That is questionable, I would argue.
That really
I guess-
surprises me.
Maybe
And you eat garbage plates 3 meals a day.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
I could.
if you could, physically. If your body could handle it. I mean, I guess
Your skull is going to reject what your body is doing in that case.
I would say the answer to this question is simply comic books, that I'm still reading this many comic books.
It is a
I'm
little
surprised by that. I guess.
Oh wow! I think that's the dream, right? If you told younger Justin, you would just be
You
like,
could be
"You gotta be
positively-
kidding me!
you could
I'm
be
a grown up,
positively
still
surprised."
killing it."
Still.
Still killing it. That's my tattoo. I got when I was 13 years old.
Still killing it.
All right, this is from Stray Bullet. Who is your favorite Beatle? And if the answer is Ringo, you may be
Oh
canceled.
wow! Yeah.
Yikes.
I don't. What our guest
don't
said
have
was
them.
very touching and very beautiful, but I do not like the Beatles much.
You don't
What?
like the Beatles? That's a controversial take. I mean, this is my answer has always been John Lennon, even though that's like the not greatest answer these days, I think.
Wait, I needed to look up the name of the movie. Pete, have you ever seen a movie called Greedy
No.
with Michael J. Fox? I think you should watch it. There's a great line in it.
Is it a sequel to Secret of My Success? Where he goes too
no,
far?
but it's like in kind of the same vein. Michael J. Fox plays this guy who is called back because the family patriarch is going to die or has died, and everybody's vying for his fortune. Michael J. Fox is the only person who doesn't want his fortune and doesn't want anything to do with the family. And the whole family thinks that he's like playing the angles, even though he's not. And it's all about how he gets sucked back into it. But there's a great line from Phil Hartman where he
rest in
turns to, I
peace,
think it's
Phil.
Olivia D'Abo. You remember Olivia D'Abo?
Alex dropping Hollywood
I know,
names
right?
like
Olivia
nothing else.
D'Abo, and It's obviously like it's a Phil Hartman delivery, but he's like, I never liked the Beatles and I don't like you.
Oh, that's a fun
Anyway, you
line.
might really identify with this movie, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Check
Kevin
out
is
Greedy.
correcting you and saying it's greed, not greedy.
No, it's greedy.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is a
Ooh,
Kevin
Kevin's
fight.
I
usually
just looked it up.
Kevin's
Greedy.
usually the guy. who
Kevin's
knows
wrong. Kevin is 100% wrong, and he should feel
Normally
bad.
not wrong.
No.
Every
he's
time
wrong.
Kevin's wrong, he has to throw a puppet away. So high
Oh.
price.
A puppet has to die.
Oh, that made me feel sad.
Yeah.
Poor Kevin.
A puppet.
Let's see. This is a question probably for you, Justin. How is the writers' SAG, presumably the strike, going?
Strike. Yes.
Yeah.
It's going. I was out on the picket line. I was away shooting the past few days for a project that is not covered by the strike. But last week I was out on the
So,
picket
yes,
line.
just to be clear, you were being a scab, right?
I was not being a scab, for sure not. But I was out on the picket lines last week, and it was going well. Numbers are still up. The vibe is strong. And last Friday, the WGA and the studios, the AMPTP, resumed talks. We got word that they're not going to update us on like a daily basis on what's happening, but negotiations have resumed. The AMPTP has decided to go to negotiate with the writers first and then come back to SAG after that. So that's actually, I think, a positive thing. We don't know what's happening. A week before that, they had a sort of not good meeting, and then the fact that they met so quickly after that, I think, is a positive sign.
Hey, all right, a little hope. That's awesome. I gotta say, Justin, something that warmed my heart is seeing a picture of you and Gabrus, reunited. That was
my guy who's in town. We hit the lines. It was great.
Just seeing the two Utes together warms my heart.
It's just like we're starting improv classes 15 years ago. Same energy.
Well, cool. And just to be clear for anybody listening, of course, we support the writers and the actors who are striking 100% and unequivocally. I hope they get everything they are asking for and more. I hope they get more.
And more.
Somehow. The MPTP is going to be like, you know what? I know you asked for a bunch of stuff. Here's more stuff. We're good guys.
Yeah, they love to give away. They're heroes.
All right, and that is it for your audience questions. We are going to move on to our next section, which is trivia. And for that, we're going to turn it over to Pete LePage.
All right. This is the part we give back to you, the lovely audience. It's an opportunity to win $25 free in the form of a gift card to Midtown Comics. Because if you had $25, you can get some comics. Or, of course, Long John Silver for some random reason that is probably commonly related. But yeah, just want someone to say, me, I'll go. I know last week, didn't we say Kevin was going to do it? Or we said somebody was going to do it?
I think Kevin is going to do it.
Kevin talked about it, but then Alex just brushed him back so hard.
Yeah.
Did I?
Well, yeah, when you were like, he's wrong.
My gosh.
And then
I'm
Justin
sorry,
was like, he's got to kill a puppet now. So.
Tell you what, if Kevin wants to do this, we will buy him a new puppet up to $25. How about that?
Oh, that's
Wow.
nice.
I think puppets are way
And
more
real quick,
expensive
this is
than
from
that.
Stray Bean. Says, recently one of those anti-fan YouTube critics said writers are just lazy. To get back to work, explain the logic of someone constantly whining about poor stories trying to undermine the strike. I think we could explain that. They're a fucking idiot. Is that...
Well, and like to go a little more nuanced with it, I think people misunderstand sort of labor movement and how it's not being lazy to strike. It's actually putting way more stress on every part of the system from not just myself, a WGA writer, but like people who are crew, IATSE, they are not working. Like everyone's suffering for this, but that's the only way that people can secure living wages in this world. And that's why there's been a heat in the last couple of years because of the great like split between sort of the super rich and everybody else. That's why there's so much more labor movement these days. It's because things have to change. It's gotten too far out of whack.
I also think, I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen the specific video, but a lot of these people are, I know this is reductive, but frustrated writers who think they could do it better and clearly they can. So they're like, oh, what are these people doing? I could do this. I could write this better. I could create this stuff better.
And who knows? Maybe they can be better writers, but if you were in the mindset of a writer, you would understand that solidarity is the only way to move forward. Like, it's not even about who's the best. It's about like, hey, we have to work together to make sure that the system works for us and not for a chat GPT that is suddenly writing all of your television shows.
Boo.
Totally. All right, why don't we bring in Kevin here?
Hey,
Kevin! So real quick, you're going to be playing
Looking
for
dapper.
A new puppet. Which puppet did you destroy?
Oh, no, I said that I'm not going to destroy any of the puppets, but I did say that fingers were expendable.
Oh, okay.
He's down one.
Fair enough.
You can puppet with as few as 2 fingers, I believe. Right, Kevin?
All right, here we go, Kev. Today's trivia is on topical comic news and a small nod to the legend, Johnny Hardwick. R.I.P. Please listen to all 3 options before making your selection. Here we go. Question number 1. Who will be writing Batman in November? Is it A, Greg Pak, B, Jason Aaron, or C, Eliza Dushku?
It's back.
I'm going to go with Jason Aaron.
You are correct, sir. Yes.
No hint necessary.
Yeah.
When only one of the answer makes sense, you don't need to give a hint.
All right. Well, Greg
Star.
Pak could be writing Batman. That would be amazing. All right, here we go. Question number 2. There is a new Image comic superhero about a firefighter who gets powers at the age of 50. What is the comic called? Is it A, Midlife, B, Max Life, or is it C, Tony Danza? So think about 50 and then the answer there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is a great tip, actually, Pete. When you're trying to do a trivia question, try to think of the answer and then give that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you,
That's a great hint.
Salvin.
No problem.
You're a
I
piece
will
of shit.
go with midlife.
You are correct. On fire, ladies and gentlemen.
Truly on fire.
No hints. This guy is killing it. All right, here we go. Which of the Marvel
Well, I think
villains?
there was a big hint there.
I was trying to brush patch it, but you called me out for it, so thank you for keeping me honest there. Appreciate it. All right, here we go. Last one. Which of Marvel's villains will take on the Illuminati starting in November? Is it A, Thanos, B, Chronemos? Don't overthink it, man.
This is great. You would know this answer if you've been listening to our Comic Book Club
Thanos.
News podcast by Alex Zalbas.
That's right. Thanos
Thank you
is
for the plug.
correct. Should be a fun comic. And Kevin, do you know which movie or TV show we'll be talking about in this C Answers of Trivia?
Oh, shoot. TV show. No wonder I wasn't thinking of anything.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we put you on the spot doubly.
Elijah Dushku, Tony Danza, and who was the third one?
John Amos.
John Amos, yeah.
John Amos.
And John Hardwick is the person?
Yeah, that's right.
Was Tony Danza on Buffy the Vampire Slayer at any point?
I
No.
don't know. I don't know.
I am not sure.
What was
That's all right. Hey, we stumped you twice today. You're going to lose 2 fingers. Very excited about it. This is going to make it a great podcast. Can't wait to see the video. Oh, yeah. Of course, we're talking about King of the Hill, R.I.P. Dale.
That makes sense. The
Well,
obvious
congratulations, Puppet.
Wait, were they all on the
Puppet.
same episode, though?
Nope. They were just on the show at some point, doing
Well, then I'm going to have to reattach the
cameos.
finger.
Yeah,
Reattach.
Kevin,
Asterisk.
congratulations. You have won a puppet up to $25. Just hit me up on the side with your request for puppet, and we'll get it off to you at your home address.
Give us a RFP, request for puppet, which is what that term means in any business.
Yeah.
And, of course, this is actually the first time I've been on the show since I got the new bookshelves.
Ooh,
Yes,
the
a lot of
puppet-
people in the
puppet
comments
bookshelves are
talking about
blown
that.
up. Yeah, Kevin, move her side around so we can see we got Alf there, of course.
And of course,
oh my
you're
God,
We're used to shelf porn, but this is puppet porn. But not how you think. Not how you
These
think.
are my puppets. So these are the Folkmanis. These are the puppet store. Those are basically licensed character puppets with Alf on top.
Nice. Of course, Alf is on
Alf
top.
is always on top.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
I'm
those
always
on
on
that
top.
shelf are non-puppet plush.
Alf's the top.
Oh, okay.
You're saying Alf is a top.
Oh,
Kevin, I
top.
appreciate the tour you're giving us here. This is great. I love it.
And then the shelves, this shelf and everything lower are books.
Yeah.
So the
Nice.
shelf that you don't see because it's right behind my couch is the comic book novels.
Ooh,
I look
nice.
forward to you puppeting those comic books because you did say that was a puppet shelf. So you better be puppeting those books, Kevin, or we're going to take another finger. And I'm talking about an important one, not one of the ones you're cutting off.
Kevin, thank you so much for
Please
coming
don't
on.
threaten Kevin live on the air.
No. Well, this needs to be a record for the police. Thanks so much for coming on, Kevin. Have a good night. Bye.
Great seeing you, Kev. Thanks
All
for
right.
listening.
There we go. Before we wrap up here, why don't we talk about what's coming out this week that you all are looking forward to?
Great
What's
stuff.
coming up? So many comics. I could start. There is a lot of stuff.
Oh,
Okay.
Since you guys are still looking.
I
there's a bunch of
was ready.
Oh, you were
Alex
ready.
has started.
Yeah.
No, I want to throw out there The Call, #1 from Image Comics. This is a new book from Kelly Thompson with art by Mattia de Luis. Don't read anything about it. Just check it out. One of the biggest, boldest debuts that I've seen in a really long time.
Nice.
I really had, I loved it, but then I was just like, why did I like it so much?
Well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll get
We'll
into it.
talk.
We'll
We'll
get
get
into
into
it. It's very interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Pete, what are you looking forward to, though?
Well, of course, I'm looking forward to Something is Killing the Children #32. What an issue. It gets a little emotional. And then, of course, I'm looking forward to, Disney Villains. Maleficent has been unbelievable. So
Pete, you have turned. You're a different man.
That
#4.
book's real good, though.
I know.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Art's gorgeous.
Yep. I got to shout out the Lonesome Hunters, the Wolf Child #2 from
Yes, dude.
Comics.
Yes.
Tyler Crook. Man, I have been loving that book. Super interesting storytelling. And I got to shout out Daredevil #14, ending Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto's run on the book in great fashion. Foggy coming out on top. I think we can all agree on that.
Always.
Potentially,
Always coming out on
allegedly,
top.
potentially.
Yeah. Alpha top,
Foggy
Foggy
does.
at top. They're never going to work together, unfortunately.
You don't know that.
Hey, Alex, you don't know that.
You don't know. You don't have a crystal ball.
All right, fair enough. Give him a chance. I'm shipping Falf is what I'm doing. All right.
Yeah.
And that is it for this week's show. Bunch of people we need to thank. We need to thank Oscar Osorio for coming on to talk about a never-ending adventure. Also, Jon Klassen for being here to talk about The Skull, a Tyrolean folktale. Next week, we're going to have Emily Ettinger continuing our skeleton theme with Skeletor the Decomposer is going to be here. Also, Justin Jordan and Andre Lavoie are going to be here to talk about Chase and Catch. Bunch of other things to plug, as Justin mentioned before. We'll be doing Comic Book Club News, a daily short-form news show. You can pick it up every single day in the Comic Book Club news feeds. 5 minutes long, just an easy thing to listen to.
Great. It's just a
Sons
little
of a
bite.
Gun, our DC podcast. We did a reread for Blue Beetle recently, and then we're going to be watching the movie this weekend and talking about that. Of course, Marvel Vision, our Marvel podcast. We missed it this week, but we are going to probably do some news and other things as we continue to truck our way towards Loki. I tried the Loki sauce. Maybe we'll talk about that.
Oh!
Riverdale After Dark, our Riverdale podcast. We got 2 episodes
Oh,
left,
my
baby,
God.
until it
Oh,
wraps
my
up. Can
God.
you even believe it? But we're going to jam-pack
Oh, my
the
God.
feed
I'm
with so many
stressed.
podcasts
I'm
coming your way.
gonna need like a couple of shows to talk about it once it's over. You know
We're
what I
going to
mean?
do it. Patreon.com/Comic Book Club to support the show and all the shows we do. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Android, Spotify, or the app of your choice. At Comic Book Live on Twitter, Comic Book Club Live on TikTok or Instagram, comicbookclublive.com. For this podcast and many more, until next time, good night.
Good night, folks.
Stray Bullies, you're still our chef, dude. I love ya.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.